All right, first off, before we begin, I'd like to thank Harav of Gaon for giving me the opportunity to take tonight and deliver a shiur for the Parsha Shavua. Harav, he is not here this week, but Zat Hashem, he'll be giving the shiur next week. This week's Parsha, Parsha Kitisa, it's one Parsha that has so many themes that could be discussed. If we look at it, it's a continuation from the previous two Parshiyot of Tulma v'Tetzaveh, continues with the finishing of the Mishkan, talks about Machatzit HaShekel, the Shem Mishkan, the Ketoret, the inauguration of B'Tzalel to be the one who's going to build the Mishkan. It talks about the Chet HaEgel. It talks about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Yudgel Midot. Then we read the Haftarah, an amazing Haftarah, where it talks about Eliyahu Navi and the whole mission that when he went to Har Carmel to perform the Korban HaKadosh Baruch Hu against the Nevei Baal. So many things to talk about, but I think perhaps most places in the world they're focusing on the Chet HaEgel, because every year we always have a question regarding the Chet HaEgel itself. So tonight's shiur is going to be based on that. And before we actually talk about what I'm going to be speaking about, if you look amongst the Acharonim, starting from the Ramchal, the Vilna Gaon, Rav Chaim Volozhin, the Baal Tanya, they all go through the aftermath of the Chet HaEgel. What did the Chet HaEgel do to our world? How did it change reality? There's a Chazal that talks about how when Bnei Yisrael received the Torah, it says in Masechet Shabbat, that at that moment they were free from the angel of death, that they were at the level of Adam HaRishon prior to the sin. So they escaped that. They lived an eternal life. It seems it's supposed to have happened. There was no longer Yetzer Hara, as it seems. They were supposed to come to Eretz Yisrael. They were supposed to live the time of Mashiach and come straight to Olam Haba. Mamash K'mo Adam HaRishon Began Eden. So Rav Chaim Volozhin in the Nefesh HaChaim, it's one of his most famous works. He talks about how the world changed completely. That once again, just as Adam HaRishon, he brought the entire world back into this darkness. When I say back into the darkness, the reason is because, according to Kabbalah, the Rizal talks about how Kadosh Baruch Hu, originally when he created the world, Kadosh Baruch Hu created it in a way that seemingly was imperfect. It was what's known as the Shvirat HaKelim, the vessels that Kadosh Baruch Hu created with, were shattered, and it brought all the evil into the world. But Kadosh Baruch Hu did it on purpose so that man could have Bechira, as brought down by the Ramchal. That man could have the Bechira Chofshit to fix creation. That was the job of Adam HaRishon. Adam HaRishon's job was just to wait a little bit and the creation would come into perfection itself. But Adam HaRishon, he messed up. And because he messed up, and by eating from the Etz HaDat in a time when it was forbidden to him, all generations, the first 26 generations of mankind that had to go and perfect whatever midah had to be fixed. We find the tzaddikim of each generation. We find from Adam, then we have Hevel and Shet and Noach and Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Shvatim, Moshe. All those people, they had to come into the world in order to perfect it. And finally comes Matan Torah, and they perfected the world, and now everything is ready to go back to the original plan. Now they come, Rav Chaim Volozhin says, it was again a destruction, and now they came to a world in which darkness pervades. And we come into a period of time in which it's been 3,500 years since this Avirah has been done, and we still have yet to fix it. And it's only going to be fixed with the Kam Mashiach Bizman Karov. So, it's the philosophy of what happened after the Chet HaEgel is something that's discussed amongst the Acharonim. But what I want to deal tonight is the Rishonim. The Rishonim, all those prior to Maran HaShulchan Aruch, those who deal with the question of what actually happened during the Chet HaEgel. How could it be possible that Bnei Yisrael came to such an extent to do a Chet HaEgel? What was even the intention of the Chet HaEgel? What was supposed to happen? So, before we give the analysis, first of all, I want to tell you that there are 4 different ways of answering this question. There's 4 different ways amongst the Rishonim. 3 amongst the Rishonim, and one Acharon. This Acharon is no other than Harav Shelan, Rav Gaon. The 4th insight is from Rav Gaon. Gave an insight. I think it's an amazing insight, and I want to share it. And perhaps I want to give my own chiddush of how it could even be found in the Parshiyot itself, where it alludes to. So there's a Chazal that's brought down in Masech Avodah Zarah, the beginning of Avodah Zarah, The Chazal asked the same question that we all ask. How is it possible Bnei Israel they could have done this Avirah? Chazal answer, the way they did Avirah was because in reality, Bnei Israel, they shouldn't have done the Avirah. Based on where they were holding, they left Egypt and they ascended to such heights that they reached the 50th level of Tahara. They shouldn't have done the Avirah. It shouldn't have even come close to their minds. So they ask, how is it possible that they still nonetheless succumb to the Avirah of doing the Chet HaEgel? So Chazal say because the Bechorah Chofshit was removed. Their freedom of choice was removed at that moment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted them, Ke'ilu, to do the Avirah. So Gemara asks, how is it possible? He wanted them to do the Avirah. He wanted Bnei Israel to do the Egel. So Gemara says, yes, because by them doing the Egel, and they were able to receive a kapara from the Egel, it was a sign for all generations to come, that Bnei Israel, no matter how bad an Avirah they do, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is never going to leave them. The worst of error is Avodah Zarah, but nonetheless, by them showing that even through Avodah Zarah, they're able to get the atonement, so too, for all generations, Bnei Israel is able to receive atonement. And then there's another interesting chazal that comes next to it, talks about David HaMelech as well. We know the famous sin of David HaMelech, how he went to Bathsheba, she was Eshedish, not Eshedish, whatever it was. So, David HaMelech, the reason he sinned, the Gemara says, is because he was not supposed to. He was on a very high madrega. But Kadosh Baruch Hu Ki'ilu made him sin to teach us that any man is able to come and to make a teshuvah happen. He's able to receive kapara no matter how low he goes. So according to Chazal tell us again, Ki'ilu Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted them to do the sin. But now philosophically this becomes an issue. Kadosh Baruch Hu wants us to do avirot. That's the will of Hashem. What exactly does that mean? How are we supposed to place? Where does it take free will? How can free will be removed? We'll go back and forth with this. What you're going to find amongst the Rishonim is something interesting, is that the Rishonim, they don't take this answer for granted. The Rishonim, they argue against the Gemara. The Mamash argue against the Gemara, and you find this many times, especially amongst the Rambam, and especially amongst the rationalists, like the Ralbag, and others along that school of thought. They hold that any time there's an issue of Hashkafa in the Gemara, we don't have to accept it. We can argue against it. We can't argue against the Gemara when it comes to halacha, but when it comes to Hashkafa, it's possible. If you can bring a different source, you can bring from logic, you can bring from other places. It's not a problem. So, B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to find 4 different other sources to see exactly what was going on. We don't want to go by this idea that the Bnei Israel was forced to do it, but maybe there was something else. They knew what they were doing, but we had to figure out what they were trying to accomplish. So, the first thing that I want to bring down is the opinion of Rashi. The opinion of Rashi, and most likely the opinion of the Rambam. When I say most likely, it's because the Rambam didn't write anything regarding the Perush to the Torah. There was no Perush to the Torah of the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. Amen. Forgive me, my voice is a little hoarse. I have a sore throat. The Rambam didn't write any Perush to the Torah. So, everything we know about the Rambam could be gleaned through the other books that he wrote. You can look in the Mishnah Torah when he brings a pasuk. We can know how he darshans that pasuk. If you look in the Moreh Nevuchim, you look how he darshans that pasuk in the Moreh Nevuchim, we know how he holds. So if you take all the compilation of all the books of the Rambam, we could actually figure out pretty much a Perush to the Torah, what it would have looked like. That's why you'll never find a seven Perush of the Torah of the Rambam. People take from other sources and they put it together. But the Perush itself doesn't exist. It's the one thing he didn't touch, besides Kabbalah. Right?
Sorry.
Right? I'm sorry to tell you that.
As far as we know.
So, if you look at Rashi, this week's Parsha, Rashi absolutely holds, like the Gemara, in a number of places, that indeed it was Avodah Zarah that was done. Bnei Israel, they had an intention for them to worship this calf as a god. Right? As the pasuk says, Elokecha Yisrael, these are your gods, Israel. These are your gods that should be seen as for worship. And with that idea, we can understand the severity of the punishment. Why Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted to get rid of them, because it was Avodah Zarah. We understand that. It might solve that problem. The problem doesn't solve is how could they have done it? How is it possible? Bnei Israel, they went through a whole year of seeing miracles through the 10 plagues. They come to Kriyat Yam Suf, they see the splitting of the sea. They go through the war of Amalek. They see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in all His glory, opening all HaShamayim, giving them the Torah. They just, 40 days beforehand, they saw Moshe Rabbeinu coming down, HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaking to them. With all that, with over a year's worth of clear signs that God's existence is there, How can you deny? How can you think otherwise? How can you think that there's another God besides him? Did HaKadosh Baruch Hu already destroy all the gods of Egypt? That was the whole point. Rashi's position really is very questioning. And it's not only his position, it's a number of positions. So, in order to appreciate this, first of all, we have to realize something, Rabbi Type. Bnei Israel, we think that when they left Eretz Mitzrayim, there was these super tzaddikim. They were tremendous giants, unbelievable. No one liked them in the world. We have to remember who they were, where they came from. When they lived in Egypt, they weren't righteous people. We have to keep that in mind. And this isn't me saying this. This is Stam Chazal. They were on the 49th level of Tumah. Chazal tell us that they're connected to 50 levels of purity. There are 50 levels of impurity. And as soon as you reach the 50th level of Tumah, of impurity, that's the end of your spiritual awakening. It's impossible to ever get out of it. You're done, and you're going to be settled there for the rest of eternity. But Israel, they almost reached that level. During the 210 years in which they were residing in Eretz Mitzrayim, they were going down and down and down and down until they reached the 49th level. And as soon as the Pesach night happened, they were this close of going to the 50th level, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to let them leave Bechipazon quickly. Why Bechipazon? Because if they stayed even a moment longer, they would have gone to the 50th level and they would have been removed completely from Jewish existence. So what does this tell us? What is the message behind it? So Bnei Israel, they weren't tzaddikim. They had a lot of issues. Yes, there's a Chazal that could definitely be reconciled with this. Chazal tell us that there were only 3 reasons Bnei Israel they were able to get out of Egypt. Because they kept their names, they kept their clothing, they kept their language. But it doesn't say they kept their faith. They didn't keep their faith. They kept things that outside is Jewish, but the inside was not Jewish. That was the problem. So with them, they were still immersed in Avodah Zarah. They were doing Avodah Zarah in Egypt. Not the Shevet Levi, but everybody else, to a great extent, was doing Avodah Zarah. So now, you have people who are all their life, all they know is this concept of Egyptian worship, whatever extent it may be. And now they're being told in a year's time to radically change the way they think and start going and believing in only one God, which is very difficult for them to do so. So now Moshe Rabbeinu, he gives them the Torah and he goes up for 40 days. And as soon as he fails to come because of some miscalculation, they miscalculate by 1 day, what do they start doing? They panic. They start panicking. And because they don't know what to do, they just start reverting to their previous behavior. They do what's comfortable for them. They go back to what their previous mind was like, okay, fine, we don't know how to function. Without Moshe Rabbeinu, we're going to go back to the previous mannerisms in which we had, which was doing Avodah Zarah, because that was what they were accustomed to. I want to share something that I once heard from Harav Eliyahu ben Chaim Shlita. He says that the message that's brought down from the story of Bnei Yisrael doing Avodah Zarah, despite the fact that they saw these miracles, is something tremendous we have to learn. If you take a person who's been well educated all his life in Judaism, all his life, he's been brought up in a Jewish home in which everything was practiced according to God's law. He was taught to always love Torah and to perform the mitzvah of the Torah with ahava and yirah and everything that's associated to perfection. This person, such a person, can go through misery in their life and will still have the faith to endure no matter what's going to happen. It's never going to change his dat. If you look throughout Jewish history, especially during the time of Christian Europe, in the Middle Ages, Jews were being persecuted time after time. It was relentless. Through all the countries, through France, through Germany, through Spain, through Portugal. The list goes on and on. And England and everywhere else. Western and Eastern Europe alike. Same thing happened in the other parts of the world. But specifically there, I'm bringing down. It's a famous story with the Balei Tosfot. The Balei Tosfot, especially with Rabbeinu Tam, during the times in which Jewish persecution used to happen, the Balei Tosfot, they used to go and they used to, Al Kiddush Hashem, kill Jewish kids. Al Kiddush Hashem, kill Jewish kids, so they're not going to go and Chas v'Shalom believe in another God, believe in Yeshu or anything else of that sort. And they did so because they felt that we have to fight for our religion, we have to fight for what we have. These are the time in history in which people, look at the people that came from the French Jews, we call Rashi, Tosfot, and all their generations that followed from them. These people, they lived day and night of Torah. There was no day, no night. For them, all they lived was for Torah all their life. But despite all the hardships, despite the fact that they had to go through terrible times in which mamish they had to go and literally kill Jewish kids just to ensure that they're not going to chas v'shalom become Christians. They used to take the babies and slaughter them. Say, Baruch atah Hashem v'kol chalam, Asher kiddusham v'tzitzonu, al kiddush Hashem. They're the shechita. It's an unbelievable story. These are Balei Tosfot, the people that you read in the Gemara all the time. But nonetheless, who came out of this? Out of these people, we have all the pillars of Shas is dependent upon them. Without Rashi, without Tosfot, where would we have been? The world would have been dark. It's all because of Jewish education. Because when you have a proper Jewish education, you could go through the worst times in history and you'll still persist doing what you did. But on the other hand, if there is no Jewish education, but the only reason that you do what you do is because of some miracle that happened, a huge event that happened, it's only going to endure for so long. It's going to only last so long as it's convenient. But once it's no longer convenient, with the absence of a proper education, it's going to be lost. It's compared to a person wants to make a bonfire. You could take gasoline, you could pour it on the floor, then take a match, put it on the gasoline. It's going to be very big. It's going to be a large fire. But how long is it going to last? Short period of time. It's not going to last. Or what could a person do? He could take sticks, put it together, papers, put it together, take a match, start blowing in it. Right? Eventually it's going to catch. But how long will that fire last? Much longer. It's going to last for hours over, depending on how big you do it. What's the difference between one and the others? Because one is very flashy, one is very exciting, but the excitement is going to kill it right away. As opposed to in which there's chinuch involved, that's when you're going to actually have substance. That's where mamashut comes. So how could Bnei Israel do whatever they did according to Rashi's opinion that it was mamash avodah zarah? It was because they were still associated with avodah zarah. We can't assume that they were completely gone from it. They were still associated with it, so they came back to the familiar. And because that was the most familiar thing to them, that's why the Avarah happened. So now I said this is the opinion of Rashi and perhaps most likely the Rambam. Why most likely the Rambam? Because the Rambam writes in the Moreh Nevuchim that Bnei Israel, in truth, they were destined to be in the Midbar for 40 years. They were not supposed to come. That nation, the Dor HaDe'ah, they were not supposed to come into Eretz Israel. Despite, even without the whole issue with the Meraglim, with the spies, they were not supposed to come into Eretz Israel. Why were they not supposed to come to Eretz Israel? Is because such people, they had slave mentality. They mamash had a slave mentality. You can't expect people who just came out from Eretz Mitzrayim to go and start fighting giants, fighting wars, and to conquer a land that's unknown to them. So, because they were still in their Egyptian mentality, Rambam is telling us that slavery and idolatry was going hand in hand with them. And the Rambam says this further on in another place in Moreh Nevuchim. The Rambam actually gives technical reasons as to why a number of mitzvot are provided in the Torah. The Rambam says that a large portion of the mitzvot that are given in the Torah is in order to dissuade Bnei Israel from doing avodah zarah. One of the large categories of mitzvot that's associated with this is none other than korbanot. The Rambam asks, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give korbanot? If you look at korbanot, it seems very strange. We were doing the same thing as other pagan religions. They take animals and slaughter them and sprinkle their blood on some sort of a rockin' altar. Question is, why do we have to do it? And the Rambam says something so amazing. People bash him for him saying this, but it's true. The Rambam says the reason that Bnei Israel had the mitzvah of the korbanot, which comprises most of the mitzvot of the Torah, is because Bnei Israel, they were going to do avodah zarah if Hashem didn't tell them to do it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was trying to find an outlet for Bnei Israel to serve God without doing avodah zarah. So he says, use the practice of avodah zarah, but use it for me. Use it for my sake. So with this mentality, what is the Rambam saying? Bnei Israel, they were still associated with avodah zarah. So is it a shock that they were going to do the egel despite everything that they saw? No, it's not a shock. It's absolutely not a shock. That's the familiar. That's the approach of Rashi and the Rambam. Second approach is the approach of the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. He takes a very different approach. His approach is that indeed there was no avodah zarah that was being done over here, that the sin had nothing to do with idolatry, but it was a very different issue. And the source that he uses to make this claim is based on a very interesting fact. Bnei Israel, they only decided to do the Avodah Zarah as soon as Moshe Rabbeinu was out of the picture. Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to the mountain for 40 days, and they miscalculate by one day. They realize he's not here. So now what did they say? Since Moshe Rabbeinu is gone, let us make a god. Okay, some sort of a statue, a golden calf. The question is, we don't understand the logic. Because Moshe Rabbeinu is gone, let us make a god. So does that mean that this god comes to replace Moshe Rabbeinu? And if that's the case, does that mean that they thought Moshe Rabbeinu was a god? That doesn't make sense. No one ever assumed Moshe Rabbeinu was a deity. No one ever thinks such a thing. So therefore, the Ramban holds that just as they didn't assume Moshe Rabbeinu was a god, so too they couldn't have assumed that this statue was a god. So what must have been? It must have been some sort of a leader, some sort of a representative leader that's going to take them out just as Moshe Rabbeinu's his own position was to do. So we have to question, it's very nice, it's a very nice statement, and if that's the case, perhaps we have to ask a question, what exactly is the severity of what they did? What was such a problem that they were forced, almost to be killed? So, first of all, the problem with all this is if we look, what the Ramban is saying is that when they looked at Moshe Rabbeinu, they saw Moshe Rabbeinu as being some sort of intermediary between them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Some middle person. Now that becomes a big problem. In Judaism, you're not allowed to have an intermediary. If you want to go pray to Hashem. You want to ask something, you go to your father, you don't go to someone else. One of the reasons that the world was destroyed during the times of Enosh was because they started praying to the intermediary. They prayed to the sun, they prayed to the moon, they prayed to the stars, to all the constellations. And because they prayed to those things, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, listen, it's not going to work like this. The world is going to become corrupt. He destroyed 1/3 of the world during the time of Enosh. 1/3 of the world was flooded. Bnei Yisrael should have known better. So the problem is that they saw Moshe Rabbeinu as being the one who took them out of Egypt. It's not that Moshe Rabbeinu was the vehicle of God who he used in order to bring out the miracles. But they saw within Moshe Rabbeinu an inherent holiness that even if he was separated from God, he himself has this holiness. That if they could be medavik themselves to Moshe, they're able to also get some sort of holiness. But that's not the way it works in this world, Rabbotai. The way it works is that the Jewish belief is that all holiness in this world comes from Hashem. As much as one person or one object or one thing is close to God, is medavik to Hashem, that's what makes the intrinsic holiness. Their mistake was that assuming just as Moshe Rabbeinu was God's representative and therefore he was drawing down the Kedusha on his own accord, so too they can make some sort of representation that's going to be God's as if physical representation in this world. What would that have been? It would have been a statue. It would have been a statue, and that statue is none other than the Egel HaZahav. So when they were worshipping this God, we have to understand, it wasn't they were worshipping the God according to the Ramban because it was Avodah Zarah. That in itself, that golden calf was a representation of Hashem. It was a representation of Hashem. And with this, we could probably understand why Aharon was involved with this sin. It was none other than Aharon who actually fashioned, to some extent, this idol. Which is why later on he had to pay the price for it. We can't assume that Aharon intrinsically would have done Avodah Zarah for them. We can't assume that. And more than that, what we find when the Egel itself was completed, what was Aaron's own words? He says, "Chag LaHashem machar." He says, tomorrow is going to be a celebration for God. Clearly, even after the whole fact of making this idol, it was still only supposed to be some sort of representation. But the problem was, no representations were permitted. Because when you have the intermediary, it's mamash akin to Avodah Zarah. There's a question in halacha whereas non-Jews are not allowed to have, or to some extent are allowed to have intermediaries. This question, this idea of shituf with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, partnership with God. But for Jews, it's absolutely forbidden. So the Ramban is taking this approach that if a person wants to have a connection to Hashem, The problem is when you start going to other people and not believing you can have your own kesher to God. When you start believing in the Rebbes, the Tzaddik, the this, the that. When you start believing in the power of the other and you don't believe in the power of yourself, that's when it removes the Jewish spirit. And that was why they were chayav mita at that moment. That's the opinion of the Ramban. The third opinion is the opinion of the Kuzari, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was a famous philosopher. He preceded the Rambam. Was very different from the Rambam school of thought because the Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, he was very more on the Kabbalistic side of thinking. His hashkaf is more Kabbalistically sided, despite the fact that Kabbalah wasn't really revealed in the world to such an extent as it is today. So there's a section, I have it translated in English, I'm going to read it because it's going to take longer if it was in Hebrew with the translation. So it's found in the first Sefer to Sefer Kuzari, Perek Tzadi Zayin, chapter 97. And this is what he writes. It's a little long. We're going to read it, we're going to analyze what's going on. So, for those who never read the Sefer Kuzari, the Sefer Kuzari is a dialogue that exists between one rabbi, which would be represented as Rabbi Yehuda himself, and the Chazal king. It's a pagan king. And they're having philosophical discussion regarding God's presence in the world, God's foreknowledge, the idea of Bechira Chofshit, how long the universe is going to last. Very deep philosophical questions, the questions that you find Midrash Shonim always dealing with. So, in this section, the Kuzari, he's talking about the issue of how Bnei Israel could have done the Chet HaEgel, and what exactly was the intention behind it. And this is the third shita of the Rishonim. He writes, and I'm translating in English, all the people in those times worshipped images, all humankind. Even the philosophers who demonstrated the unity and existence of Hashem were unable to dispense with an image to which they directed their worship. Meaning even the Chachamim of the time, the great thinkers of the time, they needed some sort of a image in order to actually worship God. They explained to the masses that this image attracted some divine quality to be shown the same reverence we give to our holy places. The masses could only be persuaded to accept the worship of a tangible thing. The children of Israel, Bnei Israel, waited for Moshe to bring them down something tangible from his communion with the Almighty, as he had promised them to focus their worship on the lines of the pillar of the cloud of fire, which accompanied them on the departure from Egypt. The people heard the 10 commandments, and Moses went up to the mountain to bring down the tablets and make them an ark to constitute for them a symbol containing the covenant of God. The people were left waiting for Moshe to come down without having to change their ornaments or garments, since they have stood at the foot of the mountain during the revelation. But they had remained there while waiting for Moshe, who was 40 days late, not have taken with him any food, and having left them with the intention of returning the same day. Then some of the people were overcome with frustration, and the sensation was sown, until some individuals were prompted to ask for a tangible object of worship in the manner of the nations without reputing God who had brought them out of Egypt, merely requesting they should be placed before them to gaze upon when they relate the wonders of their God, as we do with the sky. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is saying something so unbelievable, Rabotai. Imagine how Judaism would have been so different if every time we daven, every single time we daven, we had something tangible that we could hold to remind us of Hashem. One of the problems that people have, especially in you really find it amongst religions throughout the world. The reason that idolatry was always very big was because in order to convince people to believe in something, they have to be able to associate with it. They have to feel something. Think about it as a Jewish religion. Do you find it hard that you're praying to a God that you've never heard him speak? You've never saw him. You never felt him. You never had any sensible connection with him. You're doing everything you can for this God. But there is no tangible proof, as it were, that he exists. We know philosophically, of course, he has to exist. The very first chapter of the Yesod Torah of the Rambam talks about the proof of the existence of God, and it's the first mitzvah of the Torah. The several mitzvah, the Rambam says we have to know that there's God, not just believe, but you have to know. But the problem becomes is that when you don't have a deity in which you could relate to on a sensible way, when you're coming into the religion, it becomes very difficult to relate. It's not only difficult to relate to, there's a bigger issue, is that how good would it have been if every year on Rosh Hashanah, Hashem actually tells us how we're doing. Not only are we worshiping a God that we don't see, but we're not even getting feedback as to whether our worship is even worthy to be called worship. Bnei Israel, when they were starting, the embracing Judaism for the first time, this is the first 40 days of the religion. What Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is saying is that they had a problem of worshiping God because they had nothing to deal with. They didn't know how are we supposed to interact with Him, how are we supposed to relate to Him if we can't even talk to Him. There's a necessity. There is this absolute necessity in order to have some tangible thing, in order for us to actually go and, pray to God and serve God in a hopeful manner. There's a famous Rashi that's brought down in this week's parsha, last week's parsha as well. It's a machlok between Rashi and the Ramban regarding when was the tzivui, the commandment of the Mishkan, actually given. The reason this becomes a question is because this week's parsha is parsha of the Chet HaEgel. But the tzivui of the Mishkan was already said in the parsha of 2 that passed. It's also going to be in 2 weeks from now. This question is, was the commandment of the Mishkan given before the Egel, or was it given after the Egel? According to Rashi, it was given after the Egel. The Ramban says no. We go by the set of the Torah, it was actually given before. According to Rashi, the reason that we have a Mishkan, and I'm saying Mishkan deliberately, not Mikdash, the reason we have the Mishkan was because Bnei Israel needed something tangible. They were incapable of relating to Hashem without having something tangible. Which is why it was only after the fact, despite the worst Avirah, something that made it in the 10 Commandments was, you can't have any images of me. You cannot have any other golden images or images of copper or of silver. But if you look in the Kodesh Kodeshim, what was inside over there? The Kruvim. The Kruvim were there. Why were they there? What happened to the whole idea you can't have any images? In the Holy of Holies you could have images? It had to be in the one place you're not allowed to have. If in one place in the world you can't have it, should be in the Holy of Holies. What Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is saying is the reason that they did have of the Avirah had nothing to do with making intermediary. It had nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. It was because they just wanted to relate to Hashem. It was an Avera that was done al Kiddush Hashem. They wanted to have something in order to say, we want to worship you, but we have no idea how to relate to you because you're so beyond space, you're beyond time, you're beyond all conception. So therefore, what they did was make a physical representation, and they did it l'shem shamayim. Now, does that mean that all the Jews did it l'shem shamayim? Absolutely not. How many Jews died? About 3,000. It was the Erev Rav, after all, who were the ones who actually came up with the idea of doing the Egel. Only 3,000 Jews died. So, if only 3,000 Jews died, how about the other 597,000 men? What were they doing it for? Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was saying they did it l'shem shamayim. So if that's the case, what was the Avera? The Avera is, you want to have a physical representation? Not a problem. It has to be a commandment from Hashem. If it's not going to be a commandment from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have no authority to do so. There are instances in which physical representations are permitted. There are instances where there are going to be times in which it's fine. And sometimes Judaism requires symbols in order to be able to deal with it. The Kruvim is the example par excellence. But he's saying the problem was that it was not commanded. Had it been commanded, it would have been a mitzvah. You didn't have it because the command becomes an avera. It becomes an avera. That was the reason that the Chet HaEgel was a big issue. So as a synopsis, what we find is that there are 3 approaches of the Rishonim. Why was the reason the Chet HaEgel? Why was such a big problem? The opinion of Rashi, and most likely the Rambam, is that the problem was the Avodah Zarah. Opinion of Ramban, the problem was that we wanted to make an intermediary. You're not allowed to have intermediary. You want to have a connection, you deal with yourself. Found the last issue is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. And his opinion is that it's because they wanted to have some sort of a physical representation. But physical representations are not permitted. So if we look 2 out of those 3 opinions, they have some schut for Bnei Yisrael. They say, no, it wasn't so bad. They really did l'shem shamayim, to some extent. They did l'shem shamayim. Rashi's opinion, whether it's a majority opinion or it's a minority opinion, but at this point, it's the only da'at that really says it was with malice, it was with bad intent. The other two opinions say it wasn't as bad as we think. So now, with understanding the opinions of the Rishonim, go to the Achronim, or the Achrod, Harav Avraham Gaon. Shlita. He said something one time that really, for me, it really stuck. It really stuck. I think this was an insight that was so profound. Again, going back to the beginning of this drasha, we talked about Rav Chaim Volozhin. Rav Chaim Volozhin again says that the sin of the Chet HaEgel and the sin of Etz HaDat, the Tam Adam Rishon, they're equivalent. There's something to them, because before those sins were performed, Bnei Yisrael and Adam Rishon, they were on the highest levels. They reached the Yemot HaMashiach. But after those two sins were performed, they went to the lowest of the lows. What exactly does the sin of the Chet HaEgel and the Etz HaDat have in common that they would cause such destruction? The answer is impatience. They weren't patient. According to the Kabbalah, according to the Zohar and also Midrash Rabbah, it's brought down that Adam HaRishon would have been permitted to eat from the Etz HaDat if he just waited. It would have been permitted if he waited until Shabbat. If he waited until Shabbat to eat from the Etz HaDat, it would have been permitted to have it without any issue. Adam HaRishon, the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us, was created on the 6th hour of the day. He was created on the 1st hour of the day, but he actually walked on the 6th hour of the day. If he waited only 6 more hours, if he only waited 6 more hours, he would have been able to eat from the Etz HaDat, and it would have been a problem. He would have already made the Tikkun Olam, and it would have been the end of the story. But what do we find as well with our Avala, with the Chet HaEgel? What's the issue? Pasuk says, "Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe loredet min ha'ar." The nation saw that Moshe was delaying from coming down the mountain. The reason that they did Avirah was because they miscalculated by 1 day. They had to have waited. If they only were a little more patient, if they only relied on the fact that they perhaps miscalculated, they didn't rush to things, the Avirah wouldn't have happened. The cause for both of these Avirot is the fact that we've always fallen because of impatience. And from this we could understand a famous Chazal. Chazal tell us that every single Avirah in this world has some shoresh from the Chet HaEgel. It's associated with the Chet HaEgel, and that every generation we're being punished from because of the Chet HaEgel. You know why every Avirah is associated with the Chet HaEgel? Because all Avirot is because we're impatient. Every time we do an Avirah, it's because we always want immediate results, and because we don't want to wait a little longer, just a little longer, we lose out. How many Avirot come like that? All of them are rooted in that problem. So, what I was thinking was perhaps there is some sort of a remez, some sort of a hint in the Psukim that showed this to be true. And I think I found it. Our pasuk says, "Vaya'am ki boshesh Moshe lared min har." The nation saw that Moshe was boshesh from coming down the har. Rashi says, quoting from the Targum Unklus, he says, what does it mean, ki boshesh Moshe? Rashi says, "Ketargumol lashon ichor," means to delay. Boshesh means to delay. Moshe was coming down a little late because of the miscalculation. But if you look in Parshat Bereshit regarding the Etz HaDat, it says something so scary. It says something so scary. You know, when I saw this, I couldn't believe what it says over here. Pasuk says, "Vayu shneim arumim," regarding Adam HaRishon and Chava, Hishto. It says, "Vayu shneim arumim," both of them were unclothed, naked. Hadam ve'ishto, man and wife. Velo yidboshashu, they were not boshesh. What does boshesh mean over here? Boshesh over here literally means they weren't embarrassed of the fact that they were unclothed. But I think what we could say over here, boshesh means they didn't delay. They didn't delay. They just should have waited a little longer. Before having intimacy, they should have waited a little longer. Because they weren't boshesh, because they didn't delay. Therefore, they had already this necessity to impulse. This impulse came in order to get direct satisfaction from their desires, which is why, as soon as it happened, the machshava already went to do the avirah. I don't think that the word Boshesh over here only means to be embarrassed. I do believe there's some sort of a connection between the Boshesh of Moshe and the Boshesh of Adam HaRishon. So, with this, we see 4 different schemes of exactly what happened with the Chet HaEgel. It's not only what happened with the Chet HaEgel, but we have to understand the 4 main lessons that are coming out of this. And each lesson can be derived from one of the 4 perspectives which we define what the Chet HaEgel was itself. The first lesson, as we said, was to appreciate what education is, what Jewish education has the power to do. That if you educate our kids the correct way, to always show them to love Torah and mitzvot, and to always perform them, no matter what the cost is. Chas v'shalom, even if the worst things happen in life, they're able to persevere. Because miracles and good timing doesn't help anything. What helps is to have a proper Jewish education. Without it, it's not going to be shlosha ve'klum davar. Shum davar, it's not gonna hold. That's the first lesson. Second lesson is, you want something from Kadosh Baruch Hu, go to him yourself. Same as Gemara. The Gemara says that if a person needs something, if a person needs something from Kadosh Baruch Hu, what does he do? He needs to go to a Chacham. If a person needs Parnasa, he goes to a Chacham. If a person needs Refuah, he goes to a Chacham. So it's interesting, there's a perush that says, why does he have to go to a Chacham? What's the Chacham going to do? So the Acharonim, they say that it means that when you go to Chacham, the Chacham is going to teach you how to daven. So you go to Chacham in order to give you a bracha. You go to Chacham so he can teach you how to daven appropriately, so that you could get whatever you need from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Don't make intermediaries. The third is that physical representations, as good of an idea that it may be, sometimes Judaism requires it. And I don't want to even say it anymore. There might be some even achronim, poskim that hold that in davening, sometimes a person is even able to make a representation in his mind of God. It's very, very strong idea. Nobody says this is halacha l'maaseh, but some even hold that maybe sometimes it's even permitted. But the idea is that physical representations are a big isur in the Torah, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu en lo guf en lo koch b'guf. He is not a body, he's not a force in the body, he's something beyond space and time and all comprehension of human mind. So to even try to do such a thing, or even to connect to Hashem is an isur. And the fourth lesson is that we have to learn to be patient. We have to learn to take things slowly. We have to learn to evaluate things as things come by. Because all the avirot, all the problems in the world come because we don't step back and analyze the situation. If we're only able to sit back, ask a chacham for advice, ask what's supposed to be done at appropriate times, only then can success actually come. So if we're able to integrate these 4 lessons from all these 4 perspectives, we should be able to fix the chet of the egel. We should be able to see Mashiach come. Shabbat shalom.